Welcome, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Meisner-Gigstead, Director of the Miller Art Museum here in downtown Sturgeon Bay, and I'm pleased to introduce you to the Studio Door, part of the Miller's Second Thursday Education Program, a free program series bringing virtual conversations between our curator and artists connected to our Door County community, directly to you in your home. While the museum is void of life and lights remain dark during this time of social distancing, I invite you to connect here, online, and join with us as we move to a virtual platform. This series, in particular, gives you a sneak peek into future programming and direction. For nearly 50 years, the Miller Art Museum has been a driving force of our creative community, and now we are elevating our profile and steadily building on a strong foundation. We hold the incredibly unique story of human creativity in Door County with more than 1,200 permanent collection artworks. It's this history, the stories, and the individuals that created them that propel us forward and sets in motion a new dialogue for the museum and lays the groundwork for our future. A future centered on strengthening our educational offerings, deepening community engagement, and particular focus on supporting and celebrating visual artists. I hope you leave today with a sense of excitement and inspiration in the conversation that follows. I wish you all good health and sanity during this extremely challenging time. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Helen Del Judas, the curator of exhibitions and collections at the Miller Art Museum in Sturgeon Bay. Today we're going to discuss the 26-year collaboration between a master Zapotec weaver from Oaxaca and a gifted symbolist painter from Milwaukee, Wentz and Sandra Martinez of the Martinez Studio located in Door County, Wisconsin. The Martinez Studio was founded in 1994, and it is the home to an open flow of creative designs and the painstaking production of intricate tapestries created by Sandra and Wentz. I'm joined now by Sandra Martinez, who's coming to us from Dixon, New Mexico, and Wentz Martinez, who's joining us from Teotitlán del Valle. I hope I got that right, in Oaxaca, Mexico. Hi, guys. How are you doing today?
Hey, baby, really good.
So I'm so excited to welcome you to the first edition of the Studio Door. I think you were a great place to begin, and we have a lot to talk about. And I kind of want to start at the beginning a little bit. So Wentz, you grew up in Oaxaca, and Sandra, you grew up in Milwaukee. So you came together. I want to hear a little bit about how you guys came together and why Door County? Why is that the home to your art practices?
Go, Sandra.
Thank you, Wentz. 32 years ago, my dear buddies, Kathy Navis from Greens and Grains and Junction Yoga, and Diane McGolan of Monticello, right there in Sturgeon Bay, were college buddies of mine. And they found themselves in Wentz's village in Teotitlán del Valle on a trip, and came back from there and suggested that my imagery might look really interesting woven. And as Wentz and I then, I gave them a little drawing to have made. And when I got that drawing back, I wanted to meet the human that made that thing and do some more work together with credit, not anonymously, which a lot of designers go into Wentz's village and do various projects, and then the weavers are never given credit.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big, important thing for me. And then when Wentz and I met and started to really look at over the designs that I wanted to have woven, realized that this was going to be a much longer collaboration than either one of us ever envisioned.
You realized it was
and a really beautiful, yeah. And in terms of Door County, I have family in Green Bay and I have family in Milwaukee, and my Kathy and Diane were already living in Door County. So when Wentz and I decided on where to settle, we of course looked at the Southwest, which is Mecca for understanding and appreciating weaving. But with the family support and the friends, and also the understanding really that Door County is a place where you can do, as we did, paint up a sign on a piece of scrap plywood and declare that you are open to the public, and find a support and find a viewership that is really quite astounding in its aesthetics and its appreciation. And so very quickly we were welcomed and supported by that sweet community to teach everybody about this beautiful little village in Oaxaca and weaving in general and the kind of work that we do. It's an extremely supportive place, Door County. Not so much backbiting that you would see in a city. You know, people really do send lovely collectors to each other's places, really do talk up each other's work, and really do support each other. And that has proved to be a beautiful community to be part of, and something really, I believe, quite special.
That's great. And you know, I have noticed that because I'm rather new to Door County, and I've noticed that, you know, it's one of these unique enclaves, and I always describe it as kind of exotic, really, where you have just everyone's an artist. They're all doing something. They're painters, they're weavers, they're sculptors. There's, you know, all these interesting people. And then of course you have the Miller Art Museum, and Gerhard Miller, the founder of the Miller Art Museum, sort of helped establish that by inviting artists, hey, check out Door County as a place to locate yourself and build your career. How has your relationship been with the Miller Art Museum? What do you think about that?
Super warm and fuzzy. The Miller, you know, that's our hometown museum, and it's astounding to have a museum in a community as small as ours. I remember one of the juried shows many, many years ago. There was this beautiful, incredible, extremely beautiful contemporary modern painting. And I'm like, oh my God, who made this? And it was Pam Murphy. So, you know, there are ways to engage and to have your eyes open to what is available in the community through the museum's programming. The museum does a great job of supporting all of the locals who make work, not only with the juried stuff, but the invitational shows. And now, of course, the Studio Door program you're doing is going to really give some depth to some of the incredible people that are working in the county. And it's just proven to be a beautiful resource that's very accessible, not only to the public, and I love it that it's housed in the library. I love that we've combined those resources.
Yeah.
But for the artists too, to get a chance to have their work seen in an institutional setting, which really improves everyone's resume as they begin to work towards some broader awareness. So all of the programming that's been going on all these years and the influx of new programming is really exciting to see at the Miller, and it really will feed our community in a beautiful way. And we're very grateful to have been part of multiple projects with you. And this one is really wonderful because it's given us both quite a boost as we pivot to what we can do instead of all the things that we can no longer do. So thank you very much to the Miller and to you, Helen. Bright, shiny brain, another great person moving into our community. And I trust that you feel as welcomed as Wentz and I did 32 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's a great place to be.
You feel welcome. And I think it's a great, we have, you know, there's so much on the horizon for Miller, but there's a lot on the horizon for the two of you as well, isn't there? I mean, right now, Sandra, you're in Dixon, New Mexico, and you and Wentz have an exhibit at a really unique location at the Casa Perea in Corrales, Mexico. Tell me a little bit about what's going on with the exhibit.
Well, you know, we've been coming out here for many, many years whenever we can justify it, because, of course, the market, the understanding of weaving. I mean, most of the people I meet here who have anything to do with weaving have either been to Wentz's village already, they know all about it. It's wonderful to be able to jumpstart a conversation with an already deep understanding of what we do and why and where and all that. So last year we started planning a series of events here that would kick off in March and then run through May with an exhibition that would run all the way through the summer in Santa Fe. In the middle of all of that planning, we were invited to be part of a really big craft exhibition up in Seattle. So before our events here, we flew out to Seattle and were part of a craft exhibition put together at the Shack Arts Center, we were invited artists by the jurors, and the jurors are major Smithsonian curators and Bruce Pepich from RAM and Racine. So we were really honored, and we made a huge effort to get out there. That was canceled while we were in flight, and came back to the Southwest, and we were able to do the first 3 talks that we had scheduled, mount the 2 exhibitions we had in play for March, just as this thing was really ratcheting up. And then there was a pre-planned retreat for me to paint here for 5-6 weeks before we did our May events. So this was already planned as a retreat for me to paint. And I'm very, very lucky to be in a place where I have been welcomed, even though I don't live here, and really supported and really, really loved on by the people that are hosting me and are in my community here. I am starting to get some new work done. The main thing that's happened is in the last couple of years, I was drawing the Mesa ditch paths at another place in Dixon, and just finished a series of paintings, finally finished them, and those are mounted at Casa Perea. 5 of the 6 are there. Now I'm drawing the mesas here, which are completely different. The paths through here are completely different, and starting to reflect on maps, a lot of the last couple of years reflecting on maps in general. When I draw these things from my walks, I think when I'm going to go back, I can take them back with me and I can figure out, use them. And I find that they call this the land of enchantment, and not for nothing, man. Every time I go back in there, the landmarks have moved. My sense of where I am is completely disturbed. And I find this to be a very healthy thing personally, to reflect that we think we have maps, we think we have strategies, we think we have ideas of where we're going or how we're going to get where we're going. And then when we actually try to use those things that we're so sure of, we find quite often that we are on a different path, that there are different landmarks, that there's a different relationship to it than was when we planned and when we were so sure of all the strategies. So I'm personally finding that fulfilling. The other thing that's happened here is I did a lot of sculpture, in the last couple of years with wire between documents and then cut out the figures.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was here, I started bending the wire into figures. And then I'm working on Tyvek, which I completely adore because as a substitute for paper, it's extremely tough. So I work outside here in an outdoor patio, and I tack all my stuff up on clothespins on a string. And in the old days when I would do that in Oaxaca outside, which I adored, the paper would get beat up and brittle from the sun and the heat and the flapping around in the wind. And oh my God, my Tyvek, nothing happens. It just doesn't rip, nothing bad happens. So I'm really enjoying that material.
It's a material that museum people know well, because Tyvek is sort of it's got this really smooth texture to it, and it's like a fiber that's been bonded together, and so it looks like handmade rice papers with little fibers in it. But you can't rip it, you can't tear it, it doesn't scrunch. And
well, I have found ways, but it takes a lot of doing.
It's a really durable substance. People use it, for the protection of artworks, for shipping or storage or things like that. So these paintings that you're doing right now, they will eventually become weavings, right? These are basically the diagrams or cartoons for the weavings that Wentz prepares for and does. Is that correct?
Yes, they are always the root of whatever weaving designs we settle on and do, but not all of the paintings can be woven. For a lot of them, if there's a lot of line work and skinny lines involved, would have to be woven so large that you could achieve that single skinny line, and then you're talking about 10 feet wide, and that's a serious commitment of resources and time.
Yes.
So I work just in a free flow, and then Wentz and I will consult and look at what I've been up to and see if there's something in there that resonates with him that could further be developed into a weaving design.
Right.
So not all the drawings and paintings get woven, and the ones that do are always in concert with Wentz because he's the master weaver in this deal.
Right. And Wentz, you're in the studio in Oaxaca right now. I,
Yes, I am.
I can see the beautiful yarns behind you.
Right.
So what are you up to right now? You seem like are you preparing for the next year's collection or?
I'm preparing for for the summer season. I've done some new work. Actually, it's on display in Casa Perea. But, I'm always working on something new. So I just finished the piece a few days ago that I'll show in the county this summer.
Okay, that's great. Give me a
Yeah.
little bit of background about this. You're a Zapotec weaver in the Zapotec tradition, correct?
Yes.
You know,
Yes. The
what
weaving tradition goes back, way back.
it goes
Yeah.
back. And your father and your grandfather were also weavers.
They were weavers. They were weavers. Their parents. So it's a long, old tradition that we have here in the village. So yeah, I do work with mostly handspun material, handspun wool, churro wool to be specific, and that I my own, design my own. I also, as you mentioned before, we work together with Sandra with on some more designs. Um, so we have our own line of designs, Sandra and I, but I
What
produce
does
both.
that mean, hand spun? Tell me about that process of spinning.
Hand spun, it's truly hand done. I mean, they shear the sheep off, and then they wash the raw fleece, I guess they call it.
Mhm.
And then after that, they have to card it by hand. They have these carders, and they spin it, and they use the drop spindle instead of the spinning wheel, which is
Mhm.
pretty magical to watch. I think we have some videos of that because it's quite it's quite a talent that they have because it's all just fingers, pretty much. They spin the spindle, and while they stretch the fleece to make into yarn. So
And this is done by people, again, in your village that have been doing this traditionally, and it's, you know,
this is done by these spinners from a different village. They're
okay.
not from. In my village, we use the spinning wheel, but not many people spin yarn anymore because it's such a long, slow process.
Hmm.
So I go to this village where I've been buying. My parents bought yarn from them, my grandparents. So became like a family, um, friends and family with those spinners. So it's I go there maybe once a month, sometimes twice a month to collect the yarn because there's no store that you can go and buy quantity. Yeah, I go house to house. Um, Sometimes they have a pound, 2 pounds. So that's how I collect my material.
And these wools, they are naturally in a lot of different colors, right? Because
They come
depends on
in
how the sheep, you
gray
know,
sheep,
breed
black
together
sheep.
and create different, fur tonals.
I thought I was the only one before. There's actually lots of black sheep.
Yeah,
Anyhow, that was kind of difficult.
you're in good company.
It's getting yes, I do have, yeah. Anyhow, it's getting harder to find those odd colors like beiges or blacks or grays, which now the spinners are beginning to like mix the colors, a little bit of black and some white to make grays because, that kind of a breed is disappearing.
The breed of sheep
A
that
breed of sheep,
is
yeah,
a
the
gray
gray
wool.
or yes. So it's getting a little harder to find those colors, but they can make them. So and they're great. If I just tell them what to do, they do it.
One of the things that we are known for in our work is Wence's incredible color sense. He's really a master dyer as well as weaver. But one of the things we really committed to is to use the inherent beauty of the hand spun wool and not mask it. So if you think of cream, you think of beige or cream. you know, there are some natural creams in the sheep that are whiter white, some that are a little yellower, some that are a little grayer. And so then when Wentz dyes over those, we never bleach that first, so it retains its original tone variation. And then the final color is really affected by that original tone and whatever dyes Wentz has decided to use, which are all mixed, by the way. He never pulls anything right out of a can and uses it, very much mixing various tones the way a painter would to achieve a different kind of a note in the color.
Mm-hmm.
And our use and his incredible skill of playing with tonal variations within a weaving, it brings such life to the work and gives your eye so many things to wander through the nuances that it's a special aspect, because oftentimes people want to be able to order an exact color like an interior designer and have the swatches always be exactly the same.
Yeah,
Whereas in our work, we strive, yeah, well, I support making pieces look good in your room. I got no problem with that. But I really love that in our work, we've been able to focus on the inherent beauty of the natural process and the natural materials. And in the final works, they're never, no, even if we reproduce a design in a different color or at a different scale, they're never the same, because that instinctual tonal variation that the weaver is bringing to it is always engaged and makes each piece very, very individual and really a beautiful connection to the natural world.
So it's really passed from hand to hand, one sort of master craftsman into, you know, Wentz's hands with the spinners and the sheep. I mean, from the sheep to the spinner, you know, to Wentz, you know, creating these colors, and then your designs come in, right? Because the tapestries ultimately will be born from your paintings, and you're a symbolist painter, Sandra.
Well, there's two lines to our work. The one is really Wentz's geometric patterns, which are, you know, built from, I think, being steeped in pattern his entire life, but a phenomenal use of pattern. And then the separate line of work is the stuff that's coming from me, and I don't weave at all. So I'm just as in awe when a piece of mine comes off the loom as I was 32 years ago, because I know what goes into it now, but I don't do it.
Right.
And those things are only achieved in our collaboration. There's no way that it's such a beautiful thing, really, to be working with Wentz, so to have this flow through his skill set, his experience, and his knowledge. It's nothing like sending something off to an unknown person and have them send you back something. This is a very deep collaboration, and one that I'm really honored to be part of, because the work would not be the same without it flowing through Wentz. No matter who was involved in helping to weave it, it still is based on Wentz's understanding of what can be done with this thing and what he brings to the table. Plus, he tends to pick stuff that I wouldn't have thought of first. Like a couple of years ago, the big Flora piece that we've gotten a lot of attention for, I remember looking at all those paintings I was doing, and Wentz was like, this is the one, and I really want to do it like 6 by 6 feet. And I'm like, that one? Oh God, you know, that thing's won so many awards. So I pay attention when Wentz goes, I think we should do this. I say, oh, okay, then we shall. Let's go, let's do it.
Of individual visions that really produces, you know, the master works.
When it's coming from one of my paintings, it's there's initial studies, loose paintings and drawings that I'm doing, and then we decide, well, maybe this might be a one, and then I'll work it up into a larger painting and drawings that are the size that a weaving would be. Mm-hmm. And then after we discuss it some more, then I'll make a final, what we call a cartoon, which is really a Sharpie marker drawing on a big sheet of white paper exactly to the size that the weaving will be made. And then the weavers use that as a template, literally underneath the strings of the warp with the paper underneath, and then marking the warp with Sharpie, so they can really nail those curves. This isn't eyeball, oh, there's the painting and now I'm gonna weave it. There's a literal pattern for them to follow. So that is one place where I still maintain like a lot of control and a lot of joy, because I do make changes once I get it to a bigger scale. I do make adjustments to it, and I want to make sure that that is just the way I want it. Then it's released to Wentz and how it's going to be made and who's going to help make it. And then we're asking Wentz and whoever's helping to make it to engage this deeper sense of tonal variation where it feels right. I'm not micromanaging. I want variation here. That should be the other humans with their skills bringing that to the table to invigorate this object. And also the outlines that you often see around certain shapes. There are areas where if we did them vertically, they would be really choppy just because of the nature of the structure of a weaving. Whereas if they're horizontal, they can be completely clean. So in a curve, there are sections where you can do it and sections where you really can't, because the choppiness would be distracting to the general design. So another area where it is really handed off to the makers who know their process, so they can make their own judgments about where I can elegantly do this line, where and how I can subtly put these variations in. And that allows for a level of collaboration that really acknowledges the skill set of the other people involved, and isn't just me going, thou shalt put a red line here, damn it, even if it's, you know. So anyway, I think it's a beautiful way of doing collaboration where you really are handing off to another person to invest themselves into it. Makes for an object that couldn't possibly exist without the whole group of people involved in producing it, and honors everyone's skill set along the way. So we like it.
That's amazing, and a very special thing. I don't think that there's a lot of art forms that necessarily do that. I want to talk a little bit about the actual images that you guys. I want to talk about the images that you guys produce. You call yourself a symbolist painter, and I want to talk about that symbolism a little bit. Where do you get the inspiration, or how do these images and diagrams that you're creating, where do they come from?
Well, I'm an old potter. So I was an obsessive potter from age 14 through half of college when I really started to draw. I was never a kid who was drawing the outside world or the animals or anything. I wanted to be in clay. So very much a 3D material and very much a craft material. So when I started drawing finally, I didn't have the big skill set that many young artists do as they continue to build their hand-eye coordination in drawing. And I started to work in a simple style. I'm sure there was an inspiration from Keith Haring because it was the early 80s, late 70s, and you can't escape it. But really what it came from for me was almost a form of journaling, a kind of, I don't want to, a sense of digging into your, or to my own interior space, and almost journaling as a doodle, just drawing around some things. The real strength of the direction came from understanding and investigating not only conceptual art, because I studied a lot of conceptual art, which blows open the doors. Whatever style I choose, whatever materials I choose, I have the right and the joy of being completely free as an artist to do anything, any way I want. So when I started doing these sort of stick figure, primitive, ancient looking kinds of things, I feel a real deep relationship to ancient culture's use of mark making for ritual, for preserving myth, story, those kind of drawings that are done from a place not just to replicate the outside world, but to really go into an inner world. That became a tool for me, a tool for living, something that allowed my daily play and art to be really connected to my personal growth and whatever I was going through at any given time. And I was lucky to have a professor who encouraged that instead of discouraged that. So I've been drawing in this kind of style for 40 years and have done a lot of things with it because it ends up being pretty graphic and sort of bold, and the symbolist aspect, symbol aspect can be used in a lot of different ways. So I've done block prints on scarves for a million years, bags, all, you know, I still do the glassware with laser cut decals on it, weaving, so many different things that I can do with the images once they're generated. But for me, the point has always been that when I generate them, this is personal growth. This is a tool for living for me. This is a thing that I can always go to. And my deal about the imagery is that I don't like them very much when they are too tied to actual proportion of a figure. Mm-hmm. I'm much more interested in them when they feel like a mashup of maybe human, plant, shelter as in cave, that sort of thing. So I like the free form of them, and I use them as a tool for living, to give myself solace and give myself a private space. So I don't, unlike Keith Haring, who definitely had a message, I'm not trying to impart any specific thing that if you don't get it, then you're dumb. It's my meanderings in my head. Now that stuff is related to surrealism. It's related to automatic drawing and automatic writing, but not with some kind of voodoo aspect, although I completely adore all use of artwork to trigger those kind of interior experiences. So that's why I do it. I have found a new strategy out here now in my quarantine, where I had mentioned I was using wires between sculptures before, just as supports.
Yep.
But because this Tyvek is so tough, and I saw a really cool piece at Martha from Casa Parea at her house that was a rubbing. So I came home and felt a little stuck, as so many of us do from the massive pivot that we're all undergoing. And I started to think, well, this Tyvek is so tough, I could rub it. So I bent the wires into shapes of my figures, and then I put them underneath the Tyvek and started to use a bit of a graphite pencil to find that wire and rub that line onto the Tyvek. The Tyvek doesn't rip. And I've also found a new way that I can explore my imagery that has some extra element of chance, because I can kind of see where I'm going to put it, but the minute I slip it underneath the Tyvek, I'm off, and I'm joyful about being off. And I've made these things too, so they're bendable. So even if it's the same thing, I can twist it a little. So I get a version of that shape, and I can flip it over and get a slightly different orientation of that shape. And then now I've got this big surface covered with all of these intersecting, overlapping things that I can play with, and painting on it, pulling some darks up, pulling some lights up. And so I've actually found a new way of working that I'm really excited about, when I felt a little stuck about my normal process, because I have to feel kind of centered and calm to really do these outline contour drawings that I normally do. And this gave me a way to access some more chance and some more things to just riff on that were playful. And that was a great relief to me, to find another way, and a great relief to find that Tyvek was so damn tough that I can beat it up. Nothing happens.
It's interesting to me, Sandra, that you talk about, Keith Haring being one of maybe your early inspirations or influences, because I do see a lot of relationship between your work and Keith Haring's, but I can pick up on, Cubism in your work, surrealism, most definitely. And, you describe it often as, or the way I interpret your description of how you find your imagery, as, sort of a primitive language that is still alive. You look at archaeology, you can see this kind of symbolism in cave painting. You can see it in the early Christian markings, even in Roman graffiti, the Celts, the Mayans, you name it. There is this sort of language that, while we may consider it a primitive language, it's a very fundamental symbolism that is still quite alive today.
I think that humans have always felt the drive to make marks, and have always felt the drive to go inside and to understand ourselves from the inside out. And so I really celebrate the connective tissue of that it doesn't matter what continent we're talking about, what culture, and actually either what age, whether it's ancient drawings in a cave, or it's the surrealists playing around, or it's, now we all love Hilma af Klint and Agnes Payton, channeling, literally believing that they're channeling spirits who are telling them to make these drawings. We always have this desire to connect to our inside and find some way to make a mark that connects us then to our current reality and to the other people around us, whether it's to make a good hunt, to remember a myth, to remember the stories of our people. And one of the things I really love about my work is that it is so tied to those things that even as a neophyte without a lot of art history, you get the sense that, whoa, I see some kind of petroglyphy thing in here. And my hope, my one and only communicative art goal is that within that experience, maybe people can realize how connected we are to a human root, regardless of our language and our culture, our background, our immigration status,
It is
our
like
health
a
status.
language that, that the modern day person shares with, the ancient person, that is automatically legible to us. I mean, it's ingrained in our DNA.
Mysterious.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, now we don't know what a lot of the specific stories were and the reasons that a lot of ancient people did what they did, but we do get a general sense of what might have been going on. And I think that as humans, that continues. And I think our current state of affairs is the big reminder of how connected we are in the human race.
Yeah.
So I'm really pleased to be able to have found a tool for living that also gives somebody else a little joy. I have some collectors and friends who say that they always feel that my figures are joyful, that they don't see a real negative downward feeling about them, that there's a celebratory aspect. And I'm really grateful. I'm really grateful that the work can bring some solace and some joy to people and close that circle from the making of it and that deep need to make it and the way I'm filled up by making it, but then that the viewer can find some joy in it. And then when it comes to the weavings, oh my God, the tactile quality of them and the relationship to this, again, very ancient process that globally was discovered by every culture. We can spin something, a plant material, whatever, and we can make something that is useful as our blanket, as our bag, as our cover when it's cold. That this is another thing that points to our connection to humans, discovering how to do a useful, beautiful thing that will not only provide a function in many cases, but also provide joy in interacting with the designs of it and the reality and the tactile quality of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as artists, we're always reaching for those connections. And I think Wentz and I are especially lucky to work in ways and with materials that naturally bring that kind of connective feeling to us.
So once, that strikes a chord with me, Sandra, that, this is we're in your work, you're using a language that is connected deeply to humanity through the ages and the eons, right? That is still a really active, legible language to us today. And Wentz, you're using this art form, which really, weaving is one of the world's oldest human capacities, right? It's like one of the first things we figured out to do alongside, making tools.
Right.
So what do you think, how do you think that weaving fits into today, and particularly in your village, and in the villages around you that are carrying on this tradition? What do you think the future of that is for them? Like, have things changed, for these artisans and craftspeople, in our current times?
Well, the weaving has brought here in my village particularly great success. There's a lot of people who buys and sells. They're not actually weavers, but businesses that sells to different countries like US and Europe. So it has changed so much, except that these days, because of this coronavirus thing, there's no tourism in the village.
Right.
So all of a sudden, we are realizing that this is really, really quite a surprise to us, because now, how you gonna make a living? Of course, the businesses are not gonna suffer as much as the weavers themselves. So I'm fortunate enough to have an access in US. We haven't seen the effect of it yet ourselves, but I think it's going to be impacting our lives. So I think that's one of the reasons we're doing this kind of new way of marketing our work, because I don't know when people will be able to actually get out again.
Right.
So yes, weaving is huge part of the village life, which is like, again, it's going to be impacted pretty severely these days. But yeah. I
And as
mean,
as an art form that has been handed down, I mean, from the raising of the sheep and the breed of the sheep to the spinners and the people who create the wool, to the weavers who then work with you and the dyeing, you know, this has traditionally been handed down from generation to
yes, a
generation.
lot of people do. We used to be utilitarian. Now most people are weaving for, like, decorative items now, and especially Sandra and I's work mostly are considered as art, not necessarily just crafts and
Right,
material.
exactly. But
It's,
what is the next generation? So you know, how is this being handed off to the next generation? I mean, the contemporary world is a pretty complicated one.
there's a couple of artists here in the village now that are actually coming painters
Hmm.
and weave their own paintings pretty much. So that's a small section of the village, though. That's a little, like, I don't know, 1% of the weavers, or less than 1%. Um, but the new generations, the new generation, it's actually becoming doctors and lawyers. And so I think eventually just going to be the old people who are going to be. But that's kind of a slow thing.
And our
Most
daughter, and our daughter.
And your daughter. So your daughter is going to be like taking up the task and holding, you know, carrying the flame. You know,
hopefully,
I'm curious. Once, you know, that you said that this generation is becoming doctors and lawyers and going to college and maybe moving out of the village even. So
yeah.
do you see the you know, the passing of that heritage? Do you see that to be under a little bit of threat, or in its ability to continue, or?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we're talking about maybe 7,000 weavers in the village.
Mm-hmm.
At least, for sure, 70% of them are actively weaving.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably 50% of the 70% are going to be weavers their whole life. So the other part is going to be, either their kids are going to become doctors and eventually not weave at all.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's
You
great.
know, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, 32 years of engaging with the village and Wentz, um, it's very difficult in the village to get a design education. Now, when Wentz was growing up, you're weaving so many pieces a day to give to the dealer who's going to sell it in the shop, so you have grocery money. You do the souvenir standard designs, which are lovely and honorable and of the Zapotec tradition, based on their own ruins and patterns. But still, you're pumping out things that you know how to do by heart. Now that there's an internet, there is much more awareness for the young people of what can be done and what's getting attention and what kind of an experience of design, even if it's not taking the time to go into a museum, they're getting to see work. The formal education of design is required to really elevate work from the standard production into something fresh. And that will be very interesting to watch how those young people develop, because there are some very, very much trying hard to develop their own sense of aesthetic and their own designs within this beautiful heritage.
Mm-hmm.
But Wentz, I have to say, also was very special in that regard, because even in his generation, where as a young boy there was no electricity, to go from that to being chosen at 14 to go do a scholarship in Mexico City and study with a famous Frenchman and get a design education in an incredible city, rich and full of museum stuff. So his design was really invigorated by that training, and also, again, at a very young age, 14 to 18 in Mexico City, studying hard, not only weaving technique and dyeing technique, but design. So there was an appetite built, and that appetite was fed for Wentz as an artist in his developmental years. That was a very wonderful chance and very important chance situation that you can't easily replicate for other people. So I'm a little more hopeful about what could come really fresh from the tradition in the village. But again, so much of that requires enough money that you can eat so you can afford to go to school. so
Right.
that you can, you have to pay in Mexico, you have to pay to go to school past, I don't know what, sixth grade. So the barriers are extreme for people in poor, remote places to get that kind of education. And it's hard sometimes for me to, because I feel very sad about it. There's some astounding humans there who it's very hard to get the doors open for them to be fed in a way that Wentz was so lucky to have been lifted up and lifted out and fed that kind of experience to bring him to the artwork that he's able to do today. So mentoring down there is not just mentoring about a specific weaving technique to achieve this curve or whatever. It's about this mental thing of, you can go for it, you can learn, you can build that design muscle, you can do this. And so it's the slow opportunity of engaging with whoever might stumble into Wentz to be able to be open enough to hear that cheerleading, to hear that support and reminder that if you feel that drive, you can find a way to fulfill that. And I can tell you that it's possible because that's my life experience. So it's beautiful, and it's, as every place is got its challenges that you have to be ready to accept and surmount in order to do all the things that you dream of doing in your life. And Wentz is a phenomenal example of that kind of achievement.
So
Yeah,
it's
but you have to have the drive, though. I mean, you have to have the drive, and that's, I think, that's lacking here for the youth. They want money, easy money. Like, I want to weave 3 pieces a week so I can feed my family. But to go, like, I got very lucky myself because I had that scholarship, which wasn't enough. I mean, there was the first time I went, they only gave me 1 meal a day and where to sleep.
Hmm.
So I had to come up with the cash for transportation. Um, and then they let me go because the three of us went. The other two dropped out, and they let me go. So I had to reapply to go back. I just loved it. That's when I realized, like, you can weave anything you want. You just have to be open to it. And as I was going to school, my mentor was a painter. He's passed now, but I helped him build um, a studio, weaving studio. Brought the loom from here
Physically.
to Mexico City, and wove his designs, and that really was quite something for me. I That gave me so much hope and um, joy that I could to weave a guy's painting, a painter's painting. So
that was like an internship for you with this artist?
not necessarily an internship. I just I was taking care of this house,
Mhm.
and at the same time I had a loom, and when I'm not at school, I'm weaving his work. So that was really quite encouraging, because he was always encouraging me. Once you're not making enough money, I understand, but you're learning, and eventually you're gonna use all this knowledge that the school is giving you. Because my parents got desperate at one point. They go like, "What is this? You're supposed to be working instead of spending money."
Right.
And so the money that I was giving when I was going to the second time for the scholarship wasn't enough to cover my expenses. So I ended up buying a shoe shine box. So I did shoe shining while I was going to school in the morning and after school. On weekends, I'll be at his studio, my studio, I would say, weaving studio working. So, but the drive has to
Gotta do, huh?
the drive has to be there, because otherwise, like the other two who dropped out, they just wanted to make money to get a regular job.
Right.
I, I don't know. I just thought I'm gonna stick to this, and I love weaving. I can't imagine myself doing something else. Always creating, working with Sandra and weaving her designs. It's always new, something new. I don't get bored, so
Right.
it's a fun
So it's
life.
really the difference between a few opportunities, which, kind of goes back to what you were saying about, the education and what's actually available to people and what people can accomplish. You had this very fortunate combination of certain opportunities that,
Yes,
allowed
and
you
take
to
advantage of it. That's the key.
transform out of being a production craftsman into
Right.
an artist.
An artist. That's a big change. I actually went to school here at the art school in Oaxaca City too. Before I went to Mexico City, I would go in the evenings, like just drawing classes, painting classes, and my my parents were like, "What does that have to do with weaving?" You know.
Right.
Well, it does. It has everything to do with weaving. So yeah, I'm
Well,
pretty
you guys, I want to kind of hear about like what's coming up, because you're both going to be coming back to Door, whenever human life is free to do human life again. You're both planning on coming back to Door County. Let's hopefully sooner than later, for everybody's sake and well-being. But what are you guys planning for the future here?
Well, we are very blessed to have 26 years with our brick and mortar Martinez studio in Jacksonport. So we have a lovely, lovely group of people that come year after year. They become family. So we feel very honored to have a place like that. And our intention is to try and pivot and brainstorm as much as we can ways to use that, not only to provide experiences for our followers, but also to provide further support for other artists and other kinds of projects. So years ago, there was a really big barn on our property that was not savable. And years ago, Wentz took the barn down, and then he used all the old barn wood to build panels of outdoor walls with old barn wood on them.
Nice.
And when we would host our parties, if the weather was good and we had enough energy, we would hang our weavings on those outdoor walls so that out in the landscape of the property, there was other artwork that wasn't in the studio.
I've heard
So
of those
one of the
parties
things,
actually, and Wentz, I hear that you do quite the spread with food at these parties.
Yes, I do. I
Party
like
had just happened when I moved to Sturgeon Bay last year, so I missed the party. But hopefully, I'm gonna.
We'll do another one.
You will
you're
do
always
another one.
welcome, babe.
Yeah,
You make like a big buffet of tacos and.
I make barbacoa. It's called. It's like slow cooked pork, and make some salsas. And this barbacoa dish is special because nobody knows. I don't think they know in the U.S. that avocado leaves have such a great flavor,
Huh.
especially the avocado leaves from here. Avocado leaves from U.S. has no flavor. I'm sorry to say that.
Too many GMOs in them, huh?
Well, I don't know what they do
Yeah.
with those plants, but here the actual leaves, oh my gosh, give so much flavor to the.
Well, I can't wait. So hopefully this pandemic situation that we're dealing with lifts
I'll make
later,
barbacoa for you.
and I
Just
get some good
Well,
barbacoa.
eventually we'll be able to pivot back to some of those large events where we would routinely get 300 or 400 people coming to the property to have a taco and visit. But in the meantime, I think for this summer, I think it's clear that events of that size will be extremely problematic and discouraged, if not whatever. But so the goal now is to use those existing outdoor walls that we have and put up more, and be able to, by July and August, host some outdoor art experiences where you can maintain social distance and you can come to the property, even if it has to be metered as to how many people are on the property. I mean, we'll see what things are like in July and August, but a way to engage the work where you're not in a closed studio setting. And the other thing is that, Wentz and I, for many years, well, myself mostly with the images the graphic nature of the designs that I do, have done scarves and bags and all kinds of smaller objects that are not, $5,000 paintings and weavings. And so there's a bit of a pivot going on in that regard. I have a couple of collaborative projects with other artists in mind for accessory items that I'm kind of working on. I can't quite announce details yet, but one that we did reinvigorate that will be available by July is some artist friends of ours who live in Buenos Aires, who, of course, because this is global, talk about connection, we're all gonna suffer. So many years ago, I did a series of enamel jewelry with them, with my figures, and they would do the production work. Another handoff similar to the weaving, though, here's the outline of the design, here's the general palette we want to go with, but baby, you work out where you're going to put that color within that beautiful little enamel. Oh, they were just beautiful. And so I've connected with them, and they are very grateful. We're going to go back into that collaboration and reissue some of those enamel works and earrings that were based on my figures. And I think there's a number of other things in my head about how we can use our position with a venue with 5.5 acres of outdoor space to provide some experiences that involve not only our artwork, but other people's work, just to give us all a place to love on each other from a, what will it be, 10-foot distance, and outside in 5.5 acres where there can be some wandering, which is another thing that just came to me the other day. We have some paths on our property that we love, and we take people once in a while to show them the creek and this little chunk of really deep pine forest and a number of other spots. So I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and she was saying, well, like, you're doing all these map paintings. Why don't you do a little map and we can clean up a little bit the trails so that when people are on the property eventually to be able to do some of this stuff, there's some kind of an artwork handout of where these little things are and what they are. And, you know, lit up like a Christmas tree inside my head. I'm going to blind draw those things from home to work on some silk screens and some actual giveaway stuff too. I mean, art and nature, we know heals, right? So if people can't afford to acquire, there can still be things that we can do to provide an experience and to give away some things and to have some things that are really, really accessible, just so we can continue to feed each other in that area. And it will be quite a brainstorming process for all artists and all business people. And we're very creative and we're very tough. We've had some really rough downturns in those 26 years. And so I feel very blessed and lucky that we know that we really like beans and we know that we can survive and that we have to use all of our creative juices to not only survive ourselves and our little tribe of our children and our grandchildren, both in Oaxaca, our son outside of Palm Springs, our son in Milwaukee, our step people, our circle, but then our broader circle, the other artists that we've supported, that we've shown, that we've given a venue opportunity to. There's a lot of ways that we can love up on each other as humans, and we're going to step up to that and try and do everything we can to support as many people as we possibly can with some love and some light and some chance to just be together and be positive and find those pivots.
And you know, we at Miller Art Museum are here to support in any way we can. I think that's really, really great opportunity for the community. And hopefully we will get this managed so that we can, you know, kind of do the thing, get back together.
Hug! I would really like to hug again.
I can't wait to see y'all when you come back to Door County. And it's going to be such a beautiful summer. I've been on that creek, by the way, on the back of your property there. And it's kind of a wetland, really. I went kayaking out there when I was kind of discovering Door County when I first got here. It's a really beautiful wetland with petrified fallen trees and just the most beautiful sounds of nature. It's quite lovely. I think that sounds really great. I'm really excited for it.
It's quite special. And once it's open again, so that it can provide more solace to more humans,
bring our visitors.
It will be a joyful thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you guys, that's really great. I want to wish you both well, and I look forward to seeing your faces in real life again. Thank you so much for participating today in the Studio Door, the very first episode of our new program of wonderful conversations with brilliant minds like yourselves.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
we have really, we're really making it a point to try and pivot to some digital storytelling. So beyond this, Wentz and I are both trying hard to shoot and post our raw footage of Wentz weaving, the village, me and Dixon painting, Casa Perea. It was so wonderful to be able to video that walkthrough of that place because it's an old adobe, so the work is just so gorgeous there. The humans are so sweet.
Beautiful, beautiful space. Before we go, tell me just a little bit about that building. Is that a traditional adobe building?
It is a traditional adobe building, and it was a home. and it was a beloved family in that community. Corrales is just outside of Albuquerque, almost a bedroom community of Albuquerque and its own little village. So when our friend Martha found this place and it called to her, it just immediately became a community thing of people coming together to talk about what they used to do in that space, what they wish they could do in that space. And then Martha really fixing the container so that it could hold not only her Pachamama 46 years or something. She had this phenomenal, world-renowned antique Latin American gallery. That plus the sala where our work is hung, where there's often dancing. There was just a flamenco show a couple months ago, and then there's a little B&B aspect, which is so sweet. Wentz and I got to stay there, and it's a really good sleep. And it's a special thing that she's put together and she's preserved, and the community is really backing her and behind her and appreciates that this building, which could so easily have just returned to rubble as Adobe can, and instead is reinvigorated and points to their history and their love of community and all the kinds of ways that can be a container for cultural experiences and personal experiences like weddings and stuff like that. So she's a bright, shiny, warm human with deep Door County ties, and it was a really special to do something with her. And I know we'll do more. All of the venues that have canceled and all of the things that have shifted are all more or less on hold with a let's do this again kind of thing. So our time in New Mexico will return again whenever it does, and I'll enjoy it while I'm here. Also, if things lighten up, I'm not going to leave here till the beginning of June. And if things lighten up in May, I'm planning on hosting some private by appointment studio tours here in my outdoor studio, because I have all of our prime work here with me for all those exhibitions, and also the new paintings and stuff I'm working on. So I'm hoping to be able to provide some safe individual opportunities to hang out and talk and look at work, even while I'm on the road. So again, you know, you got to pivot, you got to find a little glimmer, and you got to work at that. So that's what we do. So that's what we're going to do.
Well, first of all, your work looks phenomenal in that building. I've seen the video tour. How can people find that? Why don't you give us the information? Because they can, even though the exhibits sort of, I mean,
Well,
the exhibit's closed to the public at
well,
this
they're closed.
point, but
It is completely closed. I mean, for a while there was talk of by appointment, but it is completely shut down because we all know we're going into some serious isolation here. But the on our website, under events and under studio, there are links to the websites of all of the places, and Casa Perea link is there. Our Facebook has the full raw footage videos of that stuff. Googling it, of course, would work.
Right.
Getting in touch with them and putting them on your radar for later to go see what they're up to is really a wonderful thing. We need to support our organizations and our venues. We're going to lose a lot of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, so there are links on our site, on our Facebook.
They can go to Martinez.
We're trying to get into Instagram, but that's slow.
Well, that's great. You guys, what a wonderful way to spend an afternoon in isolation, seeing your faces and having this great conversation. Wentz, thank you so much. I know that you have a busy day ahead of you and you got to get going. Best of luck to you. I know you're doing some construction work on your studio there. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
But it's Sunday, so not much going on today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, you guys. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Helen. It's always a delight to spend time with you, and I'm really glad to have done it. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye. We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.